But as we realized that the majority of the work that needed to be done was more political in nature, our organization, along with other family policy councils across the country, now I think there's 38 states that have official family policy councils in them. We decided that it was time to have a political organization or a C4 organization that could be less restricted by IRS regulations. And so the organization, Alaska Family Action, has the same board. I'm still the person in charge of that organization as well. We literally have to switch the light switch off and on when we have our board meetings because it has to be a separate nonprofit corporation according to IRS regulations. So the most important thing that we're doing in between now and November 6th is to focus on trying to recapture the Senate. And as most of you probably know, there's been a bipartisan coalition that's been at a crossroads with our issues from the very beginning in terms of the president, Gary Stevens, has said very clearly that our issues are off the table. And when he said the far-right issues are off the table, I knew very clearly what he was talking about. That's the issues that we deal with: sanctity of life, traditional marriage, religious liberty, school choice. Those are primarily the issues that we deal with. So I knew very clearly what he meant by that. I wasn't quite sure what he meant by the far-left issues. We still have to have a dialogue about that. I'm not sure. But those issues, I guess, are off the table, although some people would debate that. Ours certainly have been off the table in no uncertain terms with Hollis French in the judiciary and Betty Davis, head of the Health and Human Services. So I just want to say that it's been an interesting ride for the board as well to be able to switch over to more of a political nature in terms of we started as an organization that focuses on issues alone. And those don't change as Scripture doesn't change. It's eternal. And so there are truths that we can bank on a regular basis. But what we found was in going to some other conferences on a statewide basis, family policy councils were realizing the same thing that we were. They didn't necessarily have a bipartisan coalition, but they have some other kind of mess in their legislature. And they decided that it was time to be aggressive in using the leverage and the resources that they had to bring out the voter bloc of social conservatives. And so they did that and got behind a couple candidates and a couple races and were able to successfully turn entire legislatures, not just candidates or particular races, but entire legislatures. So with states like Iowa and Florida and Arizona, Pennsylvania, Indiana were the ones that come to mind initially. They had such success in bringing out the social conservatives as a C4 and partnering with the fiscal conservatives in their state that they were able to turn the entire legislative chamber and had phenomenal success in passing pro-family, pro-life legislation. So the rest of us said, we want to do the same thing. And so we started an effort called Reclaiming Juneau, which is something we've been kind of shopping around for a while now. We're involved, as you can see on your tables, in a couple campaigns. I put the successful ones that we were involved in. We were involved in 4 races. Ralph Deakins and John Faulkner were 2 that we also supported that weren't as successful. But we were successful in supporting Wes Keller, who's been an absolute warrior, and also with Mike Dunleavy, who we are happy to bring on board and will be leading the charge down there along with our other senators, Kathy Giesel and Fred Dyson and Charlie Huggins and many others that have been really helping. So we need to get behind these particular races. In order, the way APOC or the Alaska Public Offices Commission works, we can't say that we're going to support, if you give us a contribution tonight, we're going to support a specific candidate. What we can tell you is that we focused on 4 specific races in the Senate. We may be helping others depending on how things go because it's a moving target. Kathy Giesel's race, as she'll tell you, has become quite competitive unexpectedly. And so we'll be looking at that race as well to see what we might be able to do to distinguish her as the solid pro-life, pro-family candidate that she is. And so the bottom line is that when I had a conversation with the governor, it was we are spending an inordinate amount of money distinguishing between candidates and parties on economic issues, primarily oil taxes and resource development issues, which is fine. But I think that we're missing the vote if we don't target all of the voter blocks. And we've been able to have success in the last couple of years with ballot measure 2 in 2010 we're actually able to bring out more voters that, for that particular ballot measure than voted for Joe Miller when Lisa Murkowski was upset in that primary. They're a motivated group of voters. And in some cases, like it or not, those voters are mostly motivated by social issues. In some cases, they are the issues that are the non-negotiables. And so if they don't feel fired up, in our view, they're not going to get to the polls. And we have anemic voter turnout across the country, but in our view, we have to fire up the social conservative base if we're going to recapture the Senate and be involved in having a more stronger conservative majority in the House. And so that's what Reclaiming Juneau is all about. When I spoke with the governor about it, he agreed and said that he would be here. I promised he's going to be here. He was supposed to be here a little while ago. But he's on the way, I know that. And but just for some quick things to do before he gets here, you'll see on the there's a couple different things on your table. One that we did a while back that's called Ignite. It's still applicable because it is discussing kind of what our primary focus is as an organization in terms of education, accountability, and how we hold legislators accountable, and education, accountability, and legislation. And so we've had some success in the past in supporting legislation, but we've been at a brick wall, a serious impasse, and we haven't really been able to do. In fact, I didn't go to Juneau. It was the first time since we started the organization that I didn't even go to Juneau in last legislative session, because it just was not worth it in terms of we knew our issues weren't going to be addressed in the Senate. You'll see that we have a plan that we are very specifically targeting a few races, but we're also going to direct as many folks as we can to our website, which is a new website called akvoterguide.com. And we'll be using that every year for our values voter guide. And we have the ability to track how many people are going to that site to download guides, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. Many of you may have seen on the easel, I had a poster board made of the Koch brothers. And I think it's important to mention this. It's nationally known, internationally known. For a good read, about a page and a half, I would recommend Googling, when you have the opportunity, Koch brothers and UK Guardian. That's one of their very liberal papers in the UK. And essentially, what they did was, after the Kerry race, the Obama administration folks became very, very diligent and technically superior to the Republican Party and conservatives in terms of identifying data and really getting solid, good information on what makes their constituencies and what makes them tick and how they get to the polls. The first time it was actually utilized, and this is a multi-billion-dollar project on a national level, was during the Obama first term. And we can all vouch that that was successful. And so what happened was the Koch brothers realized that we have the ability to do the same. There's no reason why conservatives should be left behind, and that's always been the case technically. But so the last Family Policy Council conference that we went to, we were exposed to the governor is now walking in. The governor is in the House. So we were very fortunate to be exposed to some folks that were. It was a scary meeting, to be honest, because we had folks walk up to all of the Family Policy Council executives and tell us that there's more that's known about us, you, every one of us, than we could ever possibly know in terms of what we purchased because of the online footprint that we have now and all sorts of other things. So they introduced this project to us by basically saying, listen, we know more about you guys than you can ever hope to know, but the good side is we're going to be able to use this for the glory of God and to get conservatives in power, because this is not something that you should be afraid of. Now, some people are going to have the black helicopter syndrome. They're going to always wonder why all this information is had on them and what can be done with it. I'm personally not concerned about that because I don't really have anything to hide. But, and then others have different opinions about that as well. Bottom line is, though, it was an unbelievable experience for us to come as family policy councils with Focus on the Family and Family Research Council, and Susan B. Anthony lists the National Right to Life, groups that came together basically that for a first time that had ever occurred, these groups came together and said, we want to bring our data together. And it was a blind gathering of that information. So they weren't giving that information to anyone else. They were just saying, here's this group called THEMIS or I-360, which is the group that we're working with now. And so we're basically getting more information and better information than we've ever been able to have. And so we have, just as an example, I don't want to go on and on because it's technical, and I'm not technical, but I can tell you that for the last several years, we've worked very hard to get about 8,000 to 10,000 people on our email list of conservatives that are active and are involved and wanting to be engaged. Well, in one fell swoop, we're going to have close to 50,000 and much more information than we've ever had in terms of what are their passions and what districts they're in and what motivates them. And so we have a real opportunity to utilize this information the Koch brothers have and they haven't given it away, I have to tell you that. We have been able to get information, but there's been somewhat of a cost, and that's why we're having a fundraiser, so that we can utilize the data that we have now and micro-target some of these races. And so we've been told that there's, the first time we did this with the Joe Miller and Lisa Murkowski race, it was a challenge because a lot of folks that were supportive of our organization were very supportive of Senator Murkowski. And so we lost some donors, we lost a board member, we lost some allies, I guess you could say, but in the end we felt that it was the right decision to make based on how clear of a difference there was on our issues, because we can only focus on our issues. And so essentially that's what we're trying to do during this, between now and November 6th. We have the 8K voter guide that we're going to be pointing people to in record numbers through these emails that I've told you about, that will be going and being able to tell the difference by these social issues on candidates who have filled out our form. Now, there are some that have chosen not to fill out the form, and we're trying to best deal with that. I can't say that we have an answer exactly yet, because there's some allies that have chosen not to fill out our form because they think it might not be beneficial to their campaign. So we're working on that. But suffice it to say that we have a lot of really good information that candidates have provided on where they stand on these truths, internal truths. And so we're very excited to move forward, and we've been able to coordinate in a much better and broader way than ever before. And we've been blessed to be able to have a continually growing organization, but it's really taken a quantum leap in the last couple months because of the data. And so we have a tremendous opportunity, I think responsibility, to be able to motivate folks that may not be motivated otherwise on these issues. So before I introduce the governor, I thought, well, one thing real fast. I put this together when I was working this morning. You may see it on your tables. It's a VP debate form. There's 8 questions. Whoever can fill that out, and don't go on your iPhone and check all that kind of stuff. See if you can do it by your mind and what you can remember. Fill in those blanks on those questions of who the vice presidential candidates were, and submit that along with your check at the end of the fundraising reception up here at the front at the podium. We'll have a little basket here for you. But before we introduce the governor, I felt called to read some scripture to put things into perspective. There's been a lot of reasons, in my view, and I'm sure a lot of others' view, this time of year and this particular era, that we could be anxious, and we could always have a reason for trepidation and for hesitation and even fear. And I fall into that category as much as anybody. But I think ultimately what we have to do is lean into God. And in James, they say to draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. And so I thought that this would be appropriate in terms of putting things really into perspective and who's in charge. And this is Philippians 4. I'll just read a couple verses. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And I'll read this last one since it's such a good verse. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Our modus operandi for starting this whole organization is not to change necessarily the political environment in Juneau or in D.C. We are utilizing the political environment to discuss cultural issues that we think we can dialogue in a way that will glorify God, that will be salt and light, and that will point people ultimately to Christ. I've had many debates with my pastor about the separation of politics and the pulpit. And we have some disagreements, but ultimately, in fact, I had one pastor ask us if we could have just started this organization as a secular organization. Why even bring the church involved in this issue? And my take is that God is involved in everything. There's not one area where he's not concerned about, including public policy and the government and civic engagement. So we're just happy that you're here. You should be able to see your form on the table in terms of how you might be able to bless us with a gift. But it's my honor to present to you a very strong pro-life, pro-family governor, Sean Flynn.
Well, thank you for having me and Sandy here. We're happy to be joining you for a few moments tonight. And we were listening to the vice presidential debate on the way over here, and so I can name the two vice presidential candidates right now if that will help with your quiz. But going back to Lyndon Johnson is a little bit of a stretch. So I want to say thank you for your support of Alaska Family Action and the Alaska Family Council. They provide an important voice. Not only for the unborn, but for that perfect love that casts out all fear that he was speaking to. This goes beyond just pure politics. It goes to who we are as a people. If we are willing to stand for life as firmly as we are willing to stand for liberty, that is something that we each share in common and we each will do together. And I know that we share common ground on issues beyond that. But this past week, we had a ruling from the Supreme Court. I'm not sure if you had a chance to speak to that. Did George do that? Yeah. Okay. So back when it was Senator Lehman and Senator Parnell, and we had the parental consent legislation, that ended up being thrown out. We ended up with parental notification legislation. The Alaska Supreme Court just ruled on that. They upheld the parental notification on constitutional grounds when it came to an equal protection challenge and a privacy challenge. It was upheld on those grounds. There were some disturbing findings of fact in the opinion. The judge found that in his view, there is no negative mental impact from an abortion. That's something that I think some of the moms I've talked to have found differently. The judge spoke to abortion effectively being medically safe. I think we all would have strong concerns over that kind of a statement. But I would urge you to take the time to read that opinion, understand it. But I did want to communicate that we will continue standing in support of life for all Alaskans, the unborn and the living. And I just appreciate your support of groups like Alaska Family Action, Alaska Family Council, to preserve our own life and liberty in the days and years ahead. I also want to commend something to you. Joanne Pantages, you had an outstanding op-ed piece that recently ran, and if you all get the chance to look at that, that was one of the most articulate pieces I've read on the topic. I cut it out and I saved it just so that I can refer back to it. And if you get a chance to read Joanne's column, I'd urge you to do it. So thank you. I urge you to give and give heartily tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to now watch the vice presidential debate. For those of you who are interested, we promised we would make this short. You can mingle, and we'll have that going on if we can get it to work. We're hoping to have. Can we get Rob like that? You know what? There is dessert over there. So mingle, please. And if you're able to make a gift, I just need to urge you to make it to Alaska Family Action so we can specifically use that for these races. God bless you.